Today, we're going to do something a bit heavy, but absolutely crucial. We're objectively mapping out the dark turning points that allowed one failed individual to nearly destroy civilization. Because, history isn't just about memorizing dates. It's really about understanding exactly how systems break down. So let's look at the complete story of Adolf Hitler.
Okay, let's dive right into this really stark contrast. We have to understand how an unexceptional, bitter young man who was literally living in homeless shelters at 24, totally unknown and rejected, somehow rapidly amassed the power to control the most powerful military force on Earth. I mean, by 1940, he had conquered 12 nations. How on earth does a jump like that actually happen?
To figure that out, here is our chronological journey. We're breaking this down into 5 parts. First, outcast to radical. Second, exploiting a broken nation. Third, absolute power and war. Fourth, the machinery of terror. And finally, downfall and dark legacy. So, part 1, outcast to radical. We begin with his early years, examining the quiet, personal failures that really laid the groundwork for his extreme radicalization.
The environment that shaped him is so crucial here. After losing his parents and actually being rejected twice by the Vienna Academy of Fine Arts, where they flat out told him his drawings lacked emotion, he drifted into deep poverty. But early 1900s Vienna wasn't just any city. It was a cosmopolitan hub, literally boiling over with political tension, extreme nationalism, and anti-Semitism. As our source notes, he absorbed all of this like a sponge, forming a worldview completely built on hate and basically blaming his own personal failures on Jews and Marxists.
And well, that brings us to World War I. Surprisingly enough, he actually thrived in the brutal trenches as a dispatch runner. He even earned an Iron Cross, which, ironically, was recommended by his Jewish commanding officer. For the first time in his life, he found a real sense of purpose and belonging. But his absolute grief over Germany's surrender in 1918 birthed a deadly, completely fabricated, stabbed-in-the-back conspiracy theory. He falsely convinced himself that politicians and Jews on the home front had betrayed the military.
Moving right along to Section 2, Exploiting a Broken Nation. Here, we're going to see how the collective desperation of an entire country provided the absolute perfect breeding ground for an extremist.
You see, post-war Germany was an environment incredibly ripe for exploitation. Completely destroyed by the Treaty of Versailles, the public was humiliated, stripped of their land and military power, the economy was absolutely crushed by massive war reparations, hyperinflation was so crippling that people literally needed wheelbarrows full of worthless cash just to buy a single loaf of bread. To put that into perspective, a public this desperate, this profoundly humiliated, was suddenly more than willing to listen to his furious, theatrical, and highly orchestrated speeches. Now, he actually tried to seize power by force first. In 1923, a violent coup in Munich called the Beer Hall Putsch failed miserably, and 16 of his followers died. He was sent to prison, but get this, he only served 9 months, and during that short time, he dictated a book, Mein Kampf. It was a brutal, exact blueprint laying out precisely what he planned to do in plain language. But tragically, the world just didn't take it seriously enough.
It's honestly terrifying how fast a democracy can fall. By January 1933, leveraging the sheer desperation of the Great Depression, he was legally appointed chancellor. Just weeks later, he used the mysterious Reichstag fire crisis to push through the Enabling Act, essentially giving himself absolute power. In less than 3 months, democracy was completely dead. By 1935, the Nuremberg laws were passed, systematically stripping Jewish citizens with their basic rights and citizenship. He dismantled the entire system from the inside out.
Now we turn to Section 3, Absolute Power and War. This is where we zoom out to the global stage, where unchecked aggression and international hesitation plunge the entire world into conflict. When British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain famously promised peace for our time in 1938, it perfectly captured the fatal flaw of appeasement. As Hitler openly rebuilt his military and annexed Austria, the world pretty much just watched and did nothing. When he demanded the Sudetenland, foreign powers literally handed it over, desperately hoping to avoid a conflict. But Hitler correctly predicted this hesitation was rooted in cowardice, and just 6 months later, he simply took the rest of Czechoslovakia. Then, on September 1, 1939, German tanks rolled into Poland, and World War II officially began. The pace of this conquest was absolutely staggering. Poland fell in just 27 days. In 1940, France, a nation that had successfully held Germany at bay for 4 whole years during the First World War, collapsed in just 6 weeks. This completely shattered the Allies, leaving Britain standing totally alone against a massive, highly efficient war machine. But eventually, this terrifying momentum broke. First, the German Luftwaffe failed to break British resistance. Then, in 1941, he made a fatal, incredibly arrogant decision: Operation Barbarossa. He broke his pact with Stalin and invaded the Soviet Union. The sheer vastness of that territory and the brutally harsh Soviet winter just ground his forces down. Finally, the massive Allied landing at Normandy on D-Day in June 1944 successfully opened up a third front.
Which brings us to Section 4, the machinery of terror. We really need to slow down our pace here to address the absolute darkest chapter of this history, the systematic orchestration of the Holocaust.
In January 1942, senior Nazi officials met at a villa outside Berlin for the Wannsee Conference. As our sources highlight, they discussed the systematic murder of every Jewish person in Europe with a chilling, bureaucratic calmness. You have to understand, this was not just some chaotic byproduct of war, it was a meticulously designed policy of extermination. It was executed via mobile killing units in 6 industrial death camps in occupied Poland, with gas chambers and crematoria literally running day and night.
We must pause on this number. 6 million. 6 million Jewish men, women, and children were systematically murdered. This deliberate, industrialized slaughter completely eradicated 1/3 of the entire global Jewish population.
And the horrific total scale of Nazi persecution reaches 11 million victims. This broader number includes Roma people, the disabled Soviet POWs, Polish civilians, political prisoners, and others deemed undesirable by the regime. History truly has no parallel for this kind of meticulously executed terror.
Which brings us to our 5th and final section: Downfall and Dark Legacy. As his military fronts collapsed all around him, we examine his final paranoid days and the incredibly sobering lesson his rise leaves behind for all of us.
By 1943, the catastrophic defeat at Stalingrad really signaled the beginning of the end. Then, in 1944, a group of his own officers actually tried to assassinate him with a bomb placed right under his conference table. He somehow survived with only minor injuries. But this fueled severe, crippling paranoia. Refusing to accept reality, he became highly reliant on a daily cocktail of drugs administered by his physician, entirely convinced that fate was protecting him as he ordered phantom armies across maps in a desperate, delusional bid to turn the tide.
In April 1945, with Soviet troops less than a kilometer away, he was hiding deep within the Berlin Führer bunker. Unwilling to face any consequences, he married his companion Eva Braun and dictated a final will where he blamed the Jews for the war one last time. He then took his own life. Exactly 1 week later, Germany surrendered unconditionally. The regime was finally finished.
So, what does this all mean? The absolute crucial point we must take away from this explainer is this: Adolf Hitler wasn't some supernatural villain. He was a human being. The Holocaust didn't happen just because of one madman. It happened because thousands of bureaucrats calmly signed forms, millions of soldiers followed orders, and a world initially just looked away. He exploited a fragile system because ordinary people failed to act. I want to leave you with this heavy reflection. When hatred becomes policy, will we remember? The lesson here is about what happens when fear becomes violence. The only guarantee that a tragedy of this unimaginable scale never ever happens again is our unwavering commitment to remember. Every name, every face, and every number. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.